just him. We need more examples like that you're always more than who you are outside. So for me, your appearance, your behavior and your style, that's your interaction with the outside world. But you have an inner sanctuary. And that's what's so cool in a relationship, is sharing your inner sanctuary.
Cue music. Places, everybody, places. We're starting in 3, 2.
Welcome to the Autoimmune Hour, where we look at the rise of autoimmune disorders. I've brought together top experts that range from doctors, specialists, nutritionists, researchers, and even those recovering from autoimmune to bring you the latest, most up-to-date information about autoimmunity and how to live your life uninterrupted.
Thank you for joining us here on the Autoimmune Hour with Sharon Sayler. Always seek sound legal, medical, and or professional advice regarding any problems, conditions, and any of the recommendations you see, hear, or read here on the Autoimmune Hour, Understanding Autoimmune, and Life Interrupted Radio. Now, we don't want you to worry about taking too many notes, so you can join the Autoimmune Hour's Courage Club, and we'll send you the transcripts and show notes from every episode. Sign up now at understandingautoimmune.com. Now, back to your host, Sharon Sayler.
Welcome, everyone, to the Autoimmune Hour. I'm Sharon Sayler from SharonSayler.com, and as always, it's just my honor and pleasure to be with you here on another brand new episode. And I know I've said this before the last few weeks, but have you ever been in that opportunity where, wow, just the most amazing guests appear? And that's what's happening. It's awesome. I love it. I love it. I just found out we're number 2 on the autoimmune podcast you should be listening to. Isn't that exciting? I am just so thrilled to find out about that. So thank you, community, for being part of that and getting us to number 2. And hey, let's shoot for number 1. All right. We'll do that soon. Tonight, I have a very special guest on, a dear friend, longtime friend, a person I call my mentor, has taught me so much about so many things in the world. And tonight I have him on, and we're going to talk an interesting topic we haven't really covered. And that's about autoimmune and our relationships. Now, he's an expert in nonverbal communication. Many people call him the father of nonverbal communication. And he also teaches another class, I'll say every so often. It's a wonderful class called To Love, to Honor, to Negotiate. And I just love it. I've taken the course myself. And since we're right here near Valentine's Day weekend, I thought, what better time to talk to somebody about relationships. Now, I know the autoimmune diagnosis sometimes puts a deeper layer onto it, a different layer, a layer that sometimes makes it harder, maybe not. Maybe that's my own thoughts about that. But let's jump right in and let me introduce you to Michael Grinder. And Michael, thanks for being on the show.
Pleasure, pleasure, pleasure. And you're my mentor also.
Thank you. Well, any people that have been working together as long as us, I guess it goes both ways, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I was thinking about that today, Michael, how long it's been. It's been over 2 decades. Can you believe that? It's like, oh, dear. Anyway, nothing like having a dear friend to bounce ideas off and everything else for 2+ decades. And so, Michael, you know, I've taken your program before, and this is just one of many programs because he's the author of 14 books, Michael? Is it 14? I think so.
It is.
And numerous courses that he teaches, everything from nonverbal communication to group dynamics to presentation skills, just a master of all of these things. But this one is what I'll call a little sidelight, a side hustle maybe, about helping us communicate as couples. Mm-hmm. And so, Michael, I know that the autoimmune diagnosis might add another layer on it, but I can't think of a couple that really doesn't have another layer in their communication somewhere.
Completely.
What are some of the first things that you think about when you offer this course that you want to offer to people about some of the truisms about couples and communication?
Well, what's amazing is if you are married, you live longer.
Really?
Especially males. I think it's an average of 4.5 years.
Wow.
So it's healthy to be in a relationship. It's healthy.
Well, I could see that, especially now during pandemic and lockdown and everything. that idea that you're not, maybe it is, maybe not. You're not in the house alone.
Yeah.
You're not all locked down by yourself. We are social creatures after all.
Yeah. There's a comedian in Great Britain that said, he was interviewed and they said, what are you looking forward to after we get out of this COVID? He says, watching Divorce Court. So, it's both sides. We have a lot of people that are staying together that if they had a choice, they may not stay together. But staying together statistically adds years to your longevity. And it usually is, you have another person. So to me, if you're going to be married or in a relationship, because you don't have to be married to be in a relationship, you're going to get constant feedback, whether you want it or not. So you have to make sure that you're okay with that.
Well, what I love when I watch your relationship, obviously the observer looking in, but the two of you have great communication and you both speak your mind and it's okay. And I think that's critically important for couples to be able to feel like it's okay and I'm in a safe environment.
Yes. When someone says to me, so you follow the philosophy, happy wife, happy life, I go, no, we shovel while the pile's still small.
Yeah, I think that's really important. A lot of people tend to hide it, push it under the rug, but shoveling while the pile's still small. I hadn't heard that one, but that's a great way to frame it.
John Gottman, who's my hero in terms of couples, and he's the person who's done the best research in terms of why do couples stay together. He has a friend that says that when, especially males, they like to put things underneath the rug and not really examine it. And yet they can't figure out why they keep tripping as they walk by that part of the house. So even if you put it underneath the rug, it's still there.
Oh, it's still there. And one of the things that I think happens a lot with people when they have a chronic long-term condition is they try to put that under the rug.
Yep. How do you successfully bring elephants out and still breathe low enough so you're not imposing on another person with almost a displaced, I'm upset that I have this lifestyle, therefore I'm going to take it out on you. And how do you just be honest with yourself and your partner? And in my case, my partner Gail has a back that is chronic. So we talk about the three members of our relationship. There's me, there's Gail, and then the back. So sometimes I'll ask her, this is pre-COVID, I'll say, honey, could you check with our third partner? Can I take you out tonight? Because it's almost an entity in and of itself. And so if Walt Disney can make a little mouse, someone that we love called Mickey, we can take parts of our body, make it an entity so that it's apart from the relationship and still it is in the relationship.
I love that. And I want to piggyback on that. Last week we had Sarah Payton on, our mutual friend Sarah, and she would talk to it in a voice and give it a name. I know that, as I'm thinking about our conversation from last week, I can see that she would give it a name, choose a name for it, and talk to it as if it was a real entity or a real being in that curious voice, in that opportunity. And one thing I want to reflect back on is you mentioned breathe low. Let's talk a little bit about breathing, because you and I know what that means, but that could be considered shorthand.
Yeah. Sharon, you had something that you said maybe 3 years ago that has stuck with me. And every time I have an opportunity, I teach other people and give you credit. You said, if you want to breathe low, you have to get rid of your vanity. And I thought, oh, that's so smart. The little punch down there. So, if we have reverence in the East for Buddha, come on, you got to breathe low. And one of the things that has really helped me in the last, I'd say 5 years, is understanding the difference between mouth breathing and nose breathing. And because I've broken my nose 4 times, blah, 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 in life, I don't always have the easy time of breathing through the nose. But the last time I broke it, I was covered with insurance so I could get it reamed out the right way. So now I can breathe, but I have all these decades of breathing the wrong way. So when I go to sleep at night, I take and put my hand, sleeping on my side, underneath my jaw so that I can't breathe through my mouth. And I breathe through my nose. When you breathe through your nose, it goes to a lower part of your chest cavity, your lungs, as opposed to the mouth. And one of my heroes along this line is George Catlin, for those people that love art. And he did probably the most paintings of American Indians of any time in the history of the United States. And he said, to a tribe, every tribe he came across that were indigenous population, when the baby was asleep, the mother would go over and take the lips, because the baby's breathing like this, and just put it together. So that at birth and that child and that infancy, they absolutely breathe through the nose. And I went, my goodness, that's the one thing that might be accurate. When I watch cowboys and Indian movies, the Indians always have their mouth closed.
Fascinating. Yeah. And the other fascinating part is what happens when to the other person who listens to us if we're high breathing. If we're high and rapid breathing, it tends to set off that, am I in trouble, or fight, flight, or freeze, or what did I do now portion of the conversation. And sometimes I know maybe I've just got spring allergies, or I've been out working in the yard, and I'll answer the phone to my partner and he'll respond like, are you upset? Or what did I do? Or are you okay? And I'm like, of course I'm okay, because I'm not hearing that I'm breathing, not low breathing, that I'm breathing high, or maybe high and rapid, depending on what I was doing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So true. So true. Our self-image and the other person's view of us sometimes are worlds apart. And if I may, that goes back to, if you live with someone, even if they're not your partner, if they could be your roommate, you will get feedback on a regular basis, whether you want it or not.
Right. Well, let's talk about whether you want it or not then. Yeah. So I've just learned to say thank you, low breathing, and smile the best I can and say thank you and take it as a gift. It may not be the gift I wanted at the moment, but in hindsight, I can often see that it was a very valuable gift. But how do we teach ourselves to do that? I'm thinking, it took a lot of self-coaching to just smile, Sharon, and say thank you.
Depending what hand you are, I'm left-handed dominant. If you took your other hand and every time you feel like you have the first inklings of fight, flight, freeze, and you took your hand and put it on your abdomen and actually feel the hand go in and out, then you don't have to mentally go, I need to breathe low, I need to breathe low. Let your hand do the biofeedback, not your mind. And then you have an easier time. Because I want to save my mind to do other things. So anytime I can have bodily feedback, I'm going to go with that.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a great one, to put our hand down there to make sure that it's going in and out low enough. Yeah. One of them that I've recently learned, and here's a rabbit hole, everyone, is one of them I started doing recently, because for a while here during the pandemic, I was living alone, and I would learn to give myself a hug while the person across in the Zoom or the window or whatever, FaceTime, whatever it was giving themselves a hug. And I was amazed how that was even a feedback loop that you could feel.
I've often wondered during COVID times if we spend more time, for me, under the hot shower going, yeah. And I wonder if our electric bill goes up because of that. The other thing you were saying, Sharon, about feedback, whether you want it or not, one of the things that we in the course talk about is what comes from the world of boxing in terms of you're not allowed to hit underneath the belt. So underneath the belt or any topic that is off limits, we know it's just going to activate fight, flight, freeze. So what are the topics that make the sense that you have permission both ways? And what are the topics you can do it, but look out, Buster. So the question is, do we have a mutual understanding of the playing field in terms of subjects that can be brought up? And one of the things that just seems to be absolutely true, if you have three variables, that the topics are much more above the belt. And those three variables, when they're not in play, a lot of topics become below the belt. In other words, you can't bring them up at all. And that is what John Gottman calls your love map. How well do you know the other person? So Sharon, you and I know each other. So instead of saying, how are you? We can say, hey, last week, your son was doing blah, blah, blah. How's he doing? So anytime you can increase your specificity instead of just saying, how you doing? How you doing because you had a meeting today? How you doing because you had a doctor's appointment? Man, that's a love map. Just understanding each other. The second thing is the idea of fondness and admiration. How often do you say thank you, appreciate? You did the other day, and I noticed that you did, and I just want to say that was really nice. And the third one is, and this is the hard one for males, I'm included in this. When you have something that you're preoccupied with, do you tend to turn towards your partner and share, or do you tend to stuff it? And as a male, doggone it, I got to remind myself, got to share it with her. I got to share it with her. What a difference that makes.
Wow. So many questions ran through my head during that time. So let me choose one. Okay. This is the one. I, being female, if I was to have a male like that in my world that was stuffing it, are there ways to gently, lovingly, and with gratitude coax them to feel safer, and that it matters to me that they matter? If that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, if I may, the three ingredients in terms of the love map, fondness and admiration, that will set up so that they'll be more likely to turn towards and share. So it's mostly a byproduct of other things that are going on. So one of the things we recommend for couples is, in your mind, think about the love bank that you and your partner have. If you've been doing a lot of deposits, you're in good shape. You can bring up topics. They'll turn towards, they'll feel safe. If you haven't, so that's why for me, and you have a similar lifestyle, outside of COVID, I'm on the road a lot. So when I come home, I've got to make sure, talk first. Because gosh, I'd love to be touchy. I'd love to be intimate, but that doesn't work as well. So if I may, one of the things, there are two definitions of intercourse: verbal and intimacy. If you would, males in particular, if you do more verbal intimacy, you'll get more physical intimacy.
Well, I think that's true for both. Speaking from this side of the fence.
Thank you.
I think that's true for both. We definitely have to connect. And I am going to reference back to something. It's a couple of things come to mind, because both you and Sarah were teachers for me in this. And I remember a long time ago, you were talking about who's the safest person in your world. And hopefully it's the person that you're the closest to. Your partner of some sort there is the one that is the safest person in your world. And one of the things that Sarah always talks about is that we have this little radar in our head, and it's always asking two questions. Am I safe? And do I matter? And if we can get that to our partner, that they are safe and that they do matter to us with respect and gratitude and all of that, I think this makes conversations easier. I remember from my training with Gottman, though, he talks about there's always certain things that you just are never going to talk about, or you're never going to settle. And we need to take a quick commercial break. And when we come back, I want to chat about those types of things, that there are certain conflicts that we just have to get used to, that we probably just are never going to settle. So we'll be right back.
Life Interrupted Radio will return after these messages from our sponsors. It's great sponsors like these that keep this show coming to you every week. Be sure and stop by lifeinterruptedradio.com to learn more.
Your conscious lifestyle on steroids. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Hello, I'm Lisa Berry. Join me every Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for Light on Living. A chance to see new, hear different, and feel more as I shine the spotlight on all the ways to lighten the load of life's challenges. Light on Living is your link to that new way you're looking for, that new understanding that will enhance your life, and that positive connection that will support your growth. So join me and you'll gain insight and start to see things in a new way that motivates you.
OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, Their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Listen and imagine. It takes 5 seconds to send a text, and for those 5 seconds, you're driving blind. Life is worth more than a text. Stay alive. Don't text and drive.
Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org, a message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, Noise, and the Ad Council.
Hi, this is Sharon, and of course you know me from here on the Autoimmune Hour. Maybe you don't know I'm also an author. My latest book is for kids. It's Pinky Chenille and the Rainbow Hunters, a winner of a 5-star reader's favorite review. It's perfect for your early reader and a great bedtime story for your young adventurers. Check it out over at pinkychenille.com. That's PinkyChenille.com. See you there. Welcome back, everyone, to the Autoimmune Hour. I'm Sharon Sayler from SharonSayler.com, and tonight we're here with Michael Grinder. He's a longtime friend and mentor of mine, and he's known as the father of nonverbal communication. He's an expert in understanding all those body language kinds of messages that go back and forth, as well as just absolutely exquisite in how we language things as well. So it's not just the body language, but how do we say it as well? And tonight we're talking about all things relationship, because I know when you have an autoimmune diagnosis or any sort of other thing, I could say any sort of diagnosis or elephant in the room, it can often cause conflict. It can cause relationships to break down. But how do we keep them strong and really together? We're right here before the Valentine's weekend, and so I invited him to come and share, because he teaches a wonderful course called To Love, to Honor, and to Negotiate. And that really says it all right there, that last one there. So Michael, I remember from Gottman's training that he talks about that there are certain things that you're just never going to resolve. And to be honest, I've always wondered about that, because I thought, well, don't we want to try to resolve them? But I guess sometimes it's like picking on a scab, isn't it?
That's a great medical way of thinking about it. Thank you.
A little graphic there. Sorry, guys.
Gottman's research says that 69% of all the chronic back and forth are not solvable. And the way he describes it as, we all have this image of ourselves inside. And for us to give up part of that image, in other words, compromise when you're in a debate, in a dialogue, in a negotiation with your partner, actually will absolutely kill your self-identity. Those are the 69%. They're just not touchable. That's the bad news. Now, the good news is this, and it's that it has nothing to do with whether you feel satisfied in your relationship. As long as...
Tell us more.
Yeah, it's absolutely... It shocked me. In fact, I went to the Gottman weekend the same time you did, and you were part of our facilitation for Gail and I thank you for that. But one of the things he said was, it won't help to try to enter the topics for the purpose of resolving it, but you have to enter the topics. And I thought, oh, come on. I don't want to spend time on something we can't resolve. And he said, no. You've got to not go into the 69% category with, let's do it. Finally, come on. Let's get the ducks on the table here. Come on, we're going to do this. He said, as long as you go in with respect, and the way you know you have respect is if there's a sense of humor. If you try to repair any mistake you made, honey, I didn't mean to say that. What I meant to say was. So that's the underneath the rug that we put everything. It doesn't have to be resolved, but it has to be brought out. So then which of you in your communication with your partner, who's the more talkative one? Who's the one that wants to bring it up? Statistically, usually the other one becomes what's called the stonewaller. And I hate to say it, 83% of males in most relationships are the stonewallers. So that's not just talking about me, it's talking about males in general. So how do you bring it up and feel safe enough? So for me, one of the things I need is I need to know that it's going to be brought up. So if Gail says, and this is so helpful for me, in the next 2 days, we need to talk about, I can breathe so much better. But if she brings it up over the dinner table and go, oh, surprise, can't do it. So if I may, one of my heroes is Mark Gungor, who has a great YouTube clip called The Nothing Box. And he talks about the difference between male and female brains. And the male brains have compartments for all the little separate things. And each of the boxes never touch each other. Whereas a female brain, she has everything connected. So the kids, the car, the laundry, what we have for a meal, those are all interconnected. So anything that could be talked about in a conversation could trigger the person who has more of the connectivity into the category of the 69% that you can't solve. If the male doesn't know it's coming, it's much more difficult for him. So to answer your previous question, how do you make the partner feel safe? Let them know it's coming before it comes so that they can, yep, it's inevitable. I can practice my breathing. It's coming up.
Let them know it's coming in a respectful way. Sometimes when I hear this, let them know it's coming, sounds sort of like you're prepping for the fight there. Now, I want to go a place that when we do our corporate types of trainings and things, Michael, and that is surprise is the enemy of competence is one of your famous sayings. And let's talk a little bit about that, because this idea of prepping that in the next 2 days, the next week or something like that is laying the ground frame for these tougher conversations. Yeah. And let's talk about why surprise is not a good thing.
If we describe surprise as you inhale, and that's the physiological description of what surprise is, you don't have enough oxygen to the brain.
And you're in freeze. You've just frozen, by the way.
Either you fight or freeze, you're still inhaling. And at that point, it's just, you're not human. You're going to do knee-jerk reactions, whatever your oldest memories are of someone else who modeled this for me, what they did, that will tend to come into play. So the idea of knowing it's coming before it comes allows you to breathe a little bit better. Now, the question is, how do you learn to recognize for yourself your own surprises? And one way to think about that is we all go through life and we tend to recognize when things happen. I would offer that intelligence is the ability to recognize patterns. So if you can recognize a pattern, it reduces the surprise. So then you may want to consider the 4 levels of how to get to being less surprised is, do you recognize a pattern? Do you have a name, a label for that? Can you predict what is likely to happen? Then you can figure out responding. So how do you get to predict? You've got to first start with, have you seen this before? Give it a name, even if it's YX3. Give it a name. And now you can breathe better.
And though this is all done internally, guys, this is not where you say, oh, I've seen that pattern before, Michael.
And it's your pattern, not mine.
Exactly. And so that's all done internal, all of that kind of work. And patterns are so important because oftentimes, here I'm going to bring up another one of your famous ones, and that's the Q-tip. Oftentimes what happens is a pattern, instead of noticing is it's their communication style, their communication pattern, or their response pattern, is taking it personally. It's every time I do X, she or he does Y. And instead of that being a pattern of their response pattern, it's like, oh, you do that every time. So share about your Q-tip tip, because I've shared it on my show before. And guys, this is a person who taught me.
And it's not from me. It's from someone down just south of us down in Eugene. And she has her own book that's just exquisite. And because it's mostly about breathing. And she just says, on the days when you know it's going to be tough, put a Q-tip in your pocket and pretend that the QTIP stands for quit taking it personally. And then turn it over and please take it professionally instead. So it's such a great way. And There's certain times when I'm going to go, I just have not had enough sleep, exercise, just whatever. And I'm very vulnerable now to not being able to do Q-tip. So those are the times I'm going to go, boop, got to be careful even whom I'm around or what topics we bring up, just because I'm not in shape enough.
And it's absolutely okay to that part to verbalize. I'm not ready. I'm not in shape enough. I haven't had enough sleep. I need 24 hours, whatever it is. That part is the part you want to verbalize, right?
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, my heart goes out right now to, because we're in the COVID situation, to all the first responders, medical people, emergency room, fire, police. You know, they're in such, not chaos, they're in such over demandness that what happens is, in order to do well, they have to almost disassociate. They're doing their job instead of being their person. Now, the question is, when they go home, boy, that is tough, because they've got to go back to their person to maintain the relationship in that. And if they don't, then you're susceptible to divorce. So if you have a job, if you have a current season in which you have to disassociate to do well, make sure you have a way of reconnecting who you are with yourself before you get home. And boy, that is just so important. Sometimes I have had to call Gail and say, honey, I don't think you want me home right now. I'm going to take an extra 10 minutes, go the long way, and just look at new landscape. Because everything I see, I'm not really outside myself. I'm inside thinking. So let me be longer before I get home. And I'm saying this because I love you. And even more important, I love our relationship.
Let's talk about what dissociate is. So if some people haven't heard that term before, we've skirted around it and given some tips here on it. But how do we know if we've actually sort of stepped outside? I mean, it's very common in any sort of conflict, trauma, upset, grief, all the things like that. It's a very common thing that, and a lot of people don't realize that they've dissociated, and it's a survival mechanism.
Yeah. And it's helpful. So if we go back to, do I recognize the pattern? And do I have a label for it? As you're doing those two, if you don't have any feelings about it, you're disassociated. If you have a lot of feelings about it, then you're probably associated. So it's really touchy, because if you're a little more disassociated than your partner, you're constantly negotiating who can come more towards the middle so that we can be more in common. I'll give you an example. And I'm not saying this is male, female. I'm just saying this is me. Gail will ask me a really tough question. And then I will indicate, let me go away and think about it for 2 days, and I'll come back and tell you my position on it. Well, that will work in the corporate world. It is a disaster inside of a home, because what she's really asking me for is, please share the part of you that says yes to this question and the part that says no to this question, because then I have your whole person. Whereas if I come back, just my position is, I'm disassociated. I'm in my head. There's nothing below the neck that is connected with this that I'm sharing. So again, do I feel safe enough that I can share yes and no before we make the decision? So rule of thumb, when you're in a professional setting, it might be best never to share your ambivalence. But when you go home, it is a gold mine when you share your ambivalence if the other person understands and are respectful enough not to make fun of you feeling more than one way at the same time.
Wow, that's critical. As we're developing some of these new patterns, and a lot of the patterns that you're speaking to right now come from to love, to honor, to negotiate. What are some ways, I know that's a couples event. However, let's say we're just going to try this right now before we attend the couples event. What are some ways that we can lay some framework? I sometimes find here, I'll use the word surprise, we've talked about that again, where the other party goes, what are you doing? Or some, like, did you read something in a book again?
Come on. You're going to drag me to what?
Yes, exactly. What are some ways that we can lay frameworks that if we do want to begin to change and become closer I find it being more transparent, more authentic in our relationships if I was to put labels on it, but that's mine.
Brene Brown is a name that most of us recognize, and she deserves the wonderful reputation that she has. In the corporate world, I would strongly recommend, please be competent and then vulnerable. Whereas at home, you're looking and hope that both people feel safe enough that they both can be vulnerable without necessarily having to be competent. Gail doesn't love me because I make good decisions in my corporate world. She loves me because I am who I am, with all the foibles I have, and just she really, really appreciates that. So the question is, how do you make sure that you share at home who you are? And that's both when you're very logical and linear and when you're very emotional. Can you share all of it? And the more you do, the closer you normally are with each other.
And I know we've chatted about it, but it just is coming up again and almost feeling like it needs to be reinforced with a diagnosis of something, whatever it is. And in this case, we'll talk about an autoimmune diagnosis. Sometimes it feels more like the right thing to do to say, I'm fine, even if I'm not fine, just to protect the other person of having to feel like they have to do something beyond or take care or whatever that is. Can we just, before we go to our next commercial break, can we just talk about that again? Because I think that's something that's reoccurring in a lot of relationships where there is a diagnosis.
If you can just give a label to whatever that ailment is, you can then make it as there's me, you, and that label. And it just, because when you say I'm fine, you're trying to indicate that's not all of who I am. I am apart from that. And you're doing your very best to do that, but the other person has to understand it. Otherwise, they feel like when you say I'm fine, I feel like you're not letting me in, honey.
Either that or they believe that you're fine. And inside you're going, but I'm not fine. How come you can't see I'm not fine?
I'm over here. I'm over here.
Exactly.
Just that's why we call it negotiate. It's not love, honor, and obey. It's love, honor, and negotiate. The two of you have to sort out how to do that. And my goodness, just who am I? And if I may, one of the things we go into is what's called the 5 circles of humanness. Your appearance is part of who you are. Your behavior is part of who you are. Your style, your values, and your core identity. Those are all 5 of you. If you have, and you identify, I have, and then you say the label of your ailment, I am, is now that's going to be your identity. I have puts it back out here. So it's so important to understand your language of how to describe it. So I used to say, and this does not compare at all with some of your listeners, I used to say I'm dyslexic. I used to say that I am ADHD. And that was me. Now I say I have ADHD tendencies, and I have to slow down and oftentimes exercise in order to slow down. So some people say, Michael, you're really hyper. Well, for me to get through that, I have to go exercise more, not less. Instead of saying that I am dyslexic, I say, I have tendencies to reverse letters and numbers. So I have to slow down whenever I'm reading in order to be more accurate. So if I may, anytime you can take what you consider as not positive and make it respectfully, but it's got to be respectful, that it's part of you, not who you are, you have more choice.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm reflecting on an event that happened to me back in late 2019 at an event I was teaching at. And it was one of those wonderful moments. It was almost an outburst, but metaphorically, you could see the light bulb going off over this person's head. And she said, I've been making chronic fatigue who I am. And as we walked through the idea of the languaging and changing the language, you could see the face soften. It was interesting to watch the physiology change as the words changed. It was that fast. I was really surprised at how fast that change was able to integrate from I am chronic fatigue to I have chronic fatigue, or I have fatigue tendencies, or I tend to get fatigued quicker than other people, all sorts of things like that. It was amazing.
Sharon, that's just some of the wonderful things you do out in the world of having people reframe how they think about who they are. Thank you for doing that.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And on that, we need to take our final quick commercial break. And when we come back, we're going to talk some more. I don't know where we're going, but we'll talk some more about this great idea about negotiating as well. We'll be right back.
Your conscious lifestyle on steroids. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Change and growth are part of natural life, and also part of your spiritual life. Everyone needs support and guidance, especially during life passages. Upgrade yourself with the OMTimes Experts program. With OMTimes Experts, you have access to the best intuitive coaches, spiritual teachers, counselors, astrologists, and oracles. Our team was carefully selected so you can trust. Find out more at experts.omtimes.com.
Grab a cup of tea or a glass of wine and tune in for Inspired Conversations with publisher Linda Joy on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. Linda creates sacred space for leading female luminaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. A soulful venue where guests openly share the fears and obstacles they've overcome, wisdom and lessons learned, and the personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired Conversations to empower you on your path to authentic, soulful living.
Research shows we apologize up to 10 times a day, and most of the time, we say sorry as a response to someone else's mistake. What if we thanked people instead of all that unnecessary apologizing? So instead of saying, sorry, I'm rambling, you say, thank you for listening. Join us at projectforgive.com, a free, non-religious resource on global forgiveness.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Autoimmune Hour. I'm Sharon Sayler from SharonSayler.com, and tonight we're here with Michael Grinder, and we've been talking all things communication, author of 14 books and many, many numerous articles, and we've been talking about couples because here it is starting. This podcast was performed on the 12th of February, so we're going into the weekend, the Valentine's Day weekend, and one of the things I called Michael earlier about was let's talk about couples because oftentimes we can fall into a caregiver kind of role or another kind of role that really doesn't help the relationship. It tends to dynamically change the relationship when there's someone with a diagnosis. So, Michael, let's talk a little bit more about how we keep roles defined, because I think it's too easy to fall into the one that always needs care, or maybe the caregiver thinks we always need care or something like that. But how do we define our roles and keep them clearly defined?
Boy, that is a lifelong, and for me, I can't tell you where I'll be 6 months from now, even 3 months from now, and I can't remember how I was 4 weeks ago, but I know it's always morphing and evolving. It's a little bit like, the tides twice a day, it's going to change. So one of the things that I have found great help in is if you want to Google Karpman, Karpman, he talks about what he calls the victim triangle. And how do you avoid doing that? Because oftentimes a caregiver becomes a rescuer. And when you have a relationship between the person who is doing the caregiving and the person who is ill and needs some help, that relationship becomes absolutely distorted so that they each do not allow the other one to create an entity other than that particular relationship role. And so you may want to consider it will give you great information in terms of very quickly saying there are 3 things in any kind of a drama triangle, and just understanding them gives you a little more choice in terms of what's going on. Right now, Gail, since 9/11, it happened the month before, she's had a back that is an ailment. Previous to that, it was her more caregiving me. So you don't know how it's going to change. You don't know what's going to happen in the future. So the question is, how do you not get stuck in the role if I can understand your question? And I go back to, please make sure you understand you have your appearance, your behaviors, your styles, your value, and your core. If your core becomes, I am a victim, if your core becomes, I'm a caregiver, everything else is going to fall into place and you won't have options. So if you can try to get the idea of victim and caregiver, at least out the style, if not behavior, and now you have an inner sanctuary that is free to decide how I am today versus how I was yesterday. Be careful of an identity of a role.
And I think that's true. It's easy to sometimes fall into those roles just because it's the easiest way to, the easiest road. It's like, oh, they want to take care of me. Okay, that's fine. And then what happens, you're better, you don't need taking care of anymore. And then shifting out of that role and saying, okay, I'm not needing care anymore. And sometimes it needs negotiation, because sometimes it can lead to like, well, am I not doing a good job anymore, or all sorts of things. So it really requires delicate conversation around these different roles that we choose to play in our relationships.
I'm aware that when our 3 children visit us, and we visit them a lot too, but when they visit us, they are to some extent inspecting the house. How are they taking care of themselves? Are they okay here? And I totally get that. And I appreciate that they actually do it. So yeah, I'm at the point, because of my age, at some point, I will not be the one who's supporting them. They will be supporting me. So I understand that. But boy, I keep saying, I know who I am apart from all the other aspects of me.
I think that's nice to keep on topic of that. And it's wonderful to be aware of it, that it happens besides your primary partnership. It happens in any dynamic, any relationship dynamic, that sometimes we can get stuck in particular roles, and maybe it's easier just not to leave them, although it's not beneficial. Yeah. I want to make sure when I say easier not to leave them, that's like the cheating road. You got to face these things, guys.
It is. Yeah. There was one of the most unusual communities I've ever come across down in a place called Roseburg, Oregon. It was a little neighborhood, probably had maybe a dozen homes out in the country. And they had one person who was, I think, below 50 years old. All the other houses were senior citizens. And openly, everyone agreed that the one under 50 years old had the option, but not the requirement, each morning of calling saying, how you doing today? And it wasn't a long conversation, just to check in. But it was voluntary. It wasn't you have to because. And I thought, oh man, it was so much love, so much caring. And then we just saw the fellow over in Great Britain who was 100 years old named Tom. Mm-hmm. And he decided that he was going to go around his garden 100 times and raise money for a variety of purposes. When the news got a hold of that, holy cow, he was not defined by his ailments. He was him. We need more examples like that you're always more than who you are outside. So for me, your appearance, your behavior, and your style, that's your interaction with the outside world. But you have an inner sanctuary. And that's what's so cool in a relationship, is sharing your inner sanctuary.
Oh, absolutely. And not placing limits on your partner or the people in your world. I like that you said it wasn't a requirement. And too often someone does something for us nice and you're like, oh, this is nice. And they keep doing it. Pretty soon, it's almost as if it's required. You didn't bring me tea this morning. Did I do something wrong? What's wrong with you? I think that sometimes we get stuck at these kinds of things, that you do it once or twice or 3 times, all of a sudden it becomes a requirement. And I always stop and ask myself, okay, am I making this a requirement? Because it's not fair to my partner. We didn't agree to it mutually.
Yeah. And even if you did, there's still an expiration date on it and you have to renew it again.
Absolutely. I always talk about permission is not perpetual. So
Darn it.
I think that's really important to say. I talk about that in the business world too, though, Michael, that oftentimes we have permission to give someone feedback in a certain situation. Doesn't mean you have permission to give them feedback in a different situation. And so, gosh, I know we could talk about permission forever, but we're just down to the last 6 minutes. Michael and I get together. We could just chat for on and on. And Michael, share a little bit more. Any tips or tricks from the couples workshop people would really enjoy, and then we'll get into how they can find out more about it.
Well, when we do our program in person, we have 2 chairs that are next to each other, and then there's 2 chairs over here that are next to each other, and there's always a gap, because this is not group orientedness. You're a couple. You come as a couple. You stay as a couple. So when we give a concept out and we give an example of it, then we take a break, and you get to talk to each other. You don't have to talk to anyone else. You don't have to share with anyone else in the room. Well, in that sense, I think that distance learning is ideal for a couple communication workshop, because I will present something and then I'm going to say, okay, breakout rooms. I can't hear you. You can't hear me. And I tell you when to come back, because there'll be a little clock to indicate, 30 seconds and we're going to come back. So it's you two deciding. No one else knows that you're on the line. We don't have the grid showing everyone. It's just you. And then after we do about 50 to 60 minutes of presenting one way, if you want, and it's only if you want, you can ask questions or make comments. But if you're going to make a question or a comment, you have to have permission from your partner. You come as a unit, you stay as a unit, you leave as a unit. And my goodness, it's just much safer, because what works for one couple, there's no way you can say, this is the way to do it.
I'm going to be fascinated. As I said, I've attended a couple of times the live and in-person event, which is really awesome. I hadn't thought about the dynamics of distance learning, otherwise known as Zoom learning or something like that, however we want to put that. But it'll be interesting to see how this works. I can see how the safety, and the vulnerability could be greatly increased because you don't have anybody's eyes on you.
No.
Oftentimes, I've seen in the group dynamics work that you and I have done together, where sometimes you hit an emotional point and you just wish you could have an invisibility cloak because you don't want to show it on your face or something like that. I imagine this distance learning, that's going to be interesting for the amount of safety and vulnerability that it creates.
We're not even going to encourage people to show. They can absolutely have just a blank screen. They do not have to do any kind of participation. The thing I like, Sharon, because I kind of struggled with distance learning for some time. It's been almost a year. And I finally said, well, wait, what's the benefit? And why don't I run things that are to the benefit of distant learning? And what I find is, if I do perception training, if I do train presenters and couples, those are the 3, I'm going to get so much more out of doing it this way than in person, because you have a whole week between one session and the next session. I don't know what you're going to practice. You don't have to share with me. So we're going to give you the option of, here's some pre-learning if you want to do it. Here's some post-learning if you want to do it. See you next week. So I just love the advantages of distance learning in terms of when I want to develop along the way. Well, then it'd be better for me not to see you every day. It'd be better not to have a 2 or 3 day program. Let's have it once a week. So I'm really embracing this idea of, come on, let's change how we think about learning.
Oh, and I think it's wonderful too, in the events that we attended were a weekend. And so it was a lot of information all at once. Yeah. And to really just unpack it and discuss it, just as a couple, et cetera, it was interesting. And I find that doing it over 4 weeks in March it's going to be fascinating. I'll be sort of running a separate track in my mind, watching the dynamics of how the distance learning happens too, but that's not what we're sharing today. I want everybody to go over to Michael Grinder, looks like Grinder, guys, but Michael Grinder, GRINDER.com. And then it would be couples-workshop. So it's Michael michaelgrinder.com/couples-workshop. Check it out. If you've at all connected with this idea of how do I get a more deep, intense, authentic, vulnerable relationship with my partner, this is the place for you. And that's why, as you guys know, I normally don't promote a lot of things on, but I've attended this myself over the years and found it extremely valuable and want you guys to be aware of it. But you need to go over there now because it starts on March 6th. So you've only got a couple of weeks to do it. Suggest that you talk it over with your partner. Let your partner listen to the show too that we just did. And Michael, one final thought or so? We've got about a minute left. Final thought you'd like to share? And then.
Well, I'd like to be vulnerable and go, this is the most humbling course I ever do, because normally I know exactly what I think people need. I don't know what each person needs, and I don't know what the couple need. So it's more just offering this. You decide what makes the most sense. And if I may, I'm not a religious person. I'm not a spiritual person. But every night, the last thing that Gail and I say before we go to sleep is we say, God bless our relationship. Because we know that there's me, there's her, and then there's this intertwined thing that is the relationship. And my goodness, I don't deserve her and I don't deserve the relationship. And she feels the same way. So to me, I walk away when I do this course and during the course with so much gratitude in terms of I'm blessed.
That's beautiful. And from the outside looking in after all these years, you guys do deserve each other in so many ways.
Well said, sister.
Everyone, that's Michael Grinder. Check it out. It's michaelgrinder.com, couples-workshop. His last name looks like Grinder, so you could spell it that way as well. And thank you, Michael, my friend, for being on the show. Everyone, have a great week. Whatever your adventures, join me next week. Enjoy.
The information provided on the Autoimmune Hour, Understanding Autoimmune, and Life Interrupted Radio, including the websites understandingautoimmune.com and lifeinterruptedradio.com, plus social media, is for educational purposes only. What you read, hear, and see on the Autoimmune Hour, Understanding Autoimmune, and Life Interrupted Radio, and its websites, and other media outlets is based on experience only. The information should never be used for any legal, diagnostic, or treatment purposes.